Normally, I don't like to cover games like this in preview form because it can leave me less interested in covering a game when it comes to review, depending on how open the first parts are in the story delivery. And my God, am I glad I did. As always, we don't do sponsored previews or reviews, don't take paid trips to Disneyland, and never have. Though if someone wants to get me onto SpaceX, that would be wicked. The casting of Frank Stone actually looks like it may be the perfect combination of multiple developers coming together and the fruition of their ideas, especially in the horror genre. This is a combination of ideas from Behavior and their elements of horror they want to deliver, and Supermassive, who have an insane pedigree in the genre. They aim to hit both groups of fans, expanding Dead by Daylight and Supermassive games titles into a combination of both in a bit of ways, with the fiction of the Dead by Daylight universe merged with the excellence of Supermassive titles when it comes to this genre. Its main story is about a Super 8 film that's being made on the site of crimes in the past, which is where you actually play the first section. My couple of hours spent in Cedar Hills, Oregon, located in some unknown place in the Pacific Northwest state, proves that whatever strange is going on is right up my alley. You started in the preview, which is prior to the main story, in 1963 and play as a policeman investigating a baby that's gone missing, and you decide to search an old local mill. This is back when steel mills had the same success rate with safety as B-movie stars do for getting out of slasher films alive. So the idea of traipsing around and never knowing if something or someone was going to leap out worked very well. Cedar Hills has some dark shit going on, and Supermassive is trying to consistently offer a bit of mystery that feels grounded in perhaps historic crime nonfiction, but also with just enough what the hellness to sit back and think to yourself, okay, that might be my imagination or something weird's going on here. It's an immersive cinematic title, which means it's much like Until Dawn or Detroit Become Human. You move around as different characters and investigate locations. It also has co-op for passing the controller to one another for different character playing. Searching around nets you items which you can investigate for further story information. All gameplay tropes we've seen before. Each choice branches the narrative and adjusts the story's overall fate score and elements that you see later. However, almost instantly I noticed something, while not new, it's not as common as you would actually think. Choices aren't just branching in narrative, but entire processes and establishment of different storytelling plots and beats can happen at slightly different times. Case in point, talking to Tom, I initially asked him about guarding the mill and wanted to see his notes, and the location and discussion moved cordially. Noting a flask of alcohol on his desk when he was looking at records of entry into the mill, discovered after another couple of choices that he may not be entirely honest. But the second time I asked him if it was just the two of him and his dog who protected the mill, the conversation turned particularly squirrely, with another choice branching out and him becoming angry and the flask actually being noticed well in advance, which led to another question about his drinking. Now, this changed the entire atmosphere of that first playthrough of the location in the opening chapter. At that point, with his hostility still somewhat there and repeated discussions between the two, it changed the atmosphere. A broken timeline of discovery, or in this case slightly different, also adjusted my feeling of the character and the initial run I had and the investigations. This also let me find out more about the character I played, as the open discussion point about why he was there turned into who I was, something I completely missed on the first playthrough. So I went from a police officer just doing civil work and trying to get along with everybody else and a close feeling of partnership with that character, to a second playthrough steeped in a pretty heavy skepticism with the other character as the main focal point. It also means everything I found had a subtle feeling of wondering if I'd caught someone in the midst of something. It also means timing for another section slightly altered. I also found a completely different item I'd not discovered on the first playthrough, because my attitude the first time was of a man just sorta doing a random spot check, then adjusting into someone wondering if there was more at play here. Of course, all this actually plays into the game's relationship system, which can help you or hinder you, the difference between discovery and death possibly, as well as just how you get along with everybody and what clues you get. Really phenomenal in the way it made that second playthrough feel worth it. And of course, those changes weren't just done with the writing or changes in the timing of clues and discoveries, but the voice work, which surprisingly is really good in this first chapter. This guy's going to need a hernia mesh after lifting this grate up, instead of throwing it aside like so many shows or movies, like a manhole cover's made of aluminum foil wrapped around one of those cardboard pizza bottoms. He foams and spits and stutters when he's doing it. It's really good voice work there. In games like this, cinema style in particular, like Until Dawn or the Dark Pictures anthology and even Detroit Become Human, always run that risk of dropping instantly into B-movie territory. Like the developers feel it's easier to sit idly in that sphere and ignore how to really make characters feel real. But as I slowly investigated the first location, once and then again with that night watchman close on my heels, and hearing their interactions, especially one in particular, I noticed there was this odd professionalism about all the voice acting. Not them as characters, they aren't. The night watchman sees a pile of meat and bones and looks at it and points closer and says, "Is that wiener meat?" It's just in their delivery. It's the back and forth that each has, and a particularly B-movie moment that doesn't fall into that overacting space all the time. Now, other sections, particularly seen in trailers, absolutely show that they're aiming for that at times, but the initial more serious tone is being used as a nice fulcrum for the rest of the story to adjust dynamically depending on choices. And if that changes the delivery's weight or not, we'll have to see. But so far, I was really impressed. Small details, for example, after tearing the grate out of the ground, the main character's hands are shaking just like a person after a heavy lift. I like that. The voice acting with Tom, for instance, in one playthrough went from depressingly discussing his own reliance on alcohol to possibly give him strength, and more of the small tinges of loneliness and I listened to a ton of Art Bell kind of feeling, to an angry man actually tracking what was going on in the city around him in the police department, enough to have things to scream about. Graphically, the short demo had me working through this investigation with a missing child in the backwoods of Oregon as this police officer, and it delivers all that fairly well. Arriving at the local mill out in the outskirts, you meet up with that watchman, you walk through the grounds. That's when stuff started getting weird, constantly wondering if your comrade in arms is somebody that you should watch out for. And the physicality there between the characters is about what you would expect, especially climbing, which seemed a little janky. Graphically, it's good, some nice facial mocap. Up-close texture work, though, isn't near done. So I saw some texture pop in and stuff, but location itself was done well. But those textures were phenomenally low detail. I hope those get set up, especially because I turned those settings up and down. They didn't make a huge amount of difference. Rock or brick or otherwise looked pretty early. Most importantly, while short, the atmosphere though was spot on. I love the location. I used to work night security, and I love how the character's location actually speaks to a man who's worked it long enough alone that spot becomes lived in. It becomes his. Sound work was also pretty well done. This is one of those titles where a lot of it's just QTEs or walking around investigating things. Be aware of that, and it's nothing that you won't have seen if you played other Supermassive games. What I played doesn't look like it's going to change people's minds if you don't like this kind of game, but it also absolutely feels like it has a chance to please fans of the genre. I do hope they clean up the texture details and some of the animations. This is a game that they stated right from the offing is not near done. They still have some work to do on it, but so far it's starting to feel like these are two developers that coming together could end up nailing it. I saw some other previews of this and they seem to be equally high on the title. And once again, no Disney trips. We don't do that. It's all no BS, no sponsorships all the time. Peace out. Make sure to check out the new podcast channel that we have where we move the ACG podcast every single Friday. Link is in the description and in the first comment.